You're listening to the Jiu-Jitsu Lou podcast, and I'm Lou Temlett. I'm guessing you're having a good day because either you've been on the mats, considering getting on the mats, or maybe you're increasing your own performance. I'm so happy you're here listening or watching this episode. Please don't tap out before the end. When you want to make yourself as resilient as possible, start training Jiu-Jitsu. I'd like to welcome Rich Thompson to my podcast. Hi, Rich.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm absolutely top of the world. How are you?
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to hear about your journey and all the things that you're up to. But please just give me a little bit of an intro to your jiu-jitsu career.
Oh, the potted history. So my jiu-jitsu career started off as... I'm going to start even further back, actually, than the real jiu-jitsu career. I'm going to start from a kid because I was obsessed with Jean-Claude Van Damme. And I actually got into the whole martial arts scene because as a kid, everyone was doing karate, right? Yep. And I thought, this guy's kicking people, he's punching people, that looks amazing, so I'm going to go and do that. And I went down to a karate class. I must have been about 7 or 8, and absolutely hated it. I was like, all these kids are just standing around punching thin air, and it just wasn't for me. So I decided to sack that off and look at the other thing that Van Damme was amazing at, which was being jacked. So my martial arts career started off with a bodybuilding career, actually. So I got absolutely jacked myself. Then got really sick and tired of sweating going upstairs. I felt like I was massively unhealthy. I got hugely into UFC. And then a fairly long story I'll cut short was a friend of mine suggested I did MMA. So I picked that up in 2010. And I went to a guy's gym that had just opened, a guy called Scott Fairclough. He opened Shootbox Gym. It's not around anymore, unfortunately, but it was a lovely gym to start off. And after about 2 years of doing that, got quite a nasty break to my nose, needed a surgery on it, and went, I've got a full-time professional job. Maybe I could just do something a little bit different, but linked to it. So that was me. Then I went to Stealth BJJ 2012. I'd already been doing privates with the main coach there, Steve Campbell, who at the time he was probably a second degree already. Like he got his black belt in 2007 from the Gracies, actually in Brazil. He lived out there. Like the guy's an absolute legend. Wow. And so I just jumped in. I thought, I'm doing privates with Steve anyway once a week. I'll go there. And so that was that. So that was 13 years ago. I landed up at Stealth and fell in love with the gi, the culture, the ethos. And that's been me, really. It's been this insane roller coaster ever since.
Amazing. And you're now a first degree black belt. Congratulations. I always in awe of everybody that reaches black belt status, whether we put you on a pedestal or whether you're our best mates, you're there demonstrating the consistency and what somebody can achieve over their jiu-jitsu career, which I think is always, a great thing.
And that's all it is. That is all it's just consistency. Yeah. That's the one word that it is, above all else.
Has there ever been a time in your jiu-jitsu career where you haven't been consistent?
Nope. Genuinely. And that's probably why I am where I am. And I think it's that ethos that I've got. I've literally trained, I think, every week that I've been physically able to. So I've had 3 nasty injuries, which I'll probably touch on in a bit more detail, but I tore my ACL in 2019 and had surgery just after COVID. And then I think because I went absolutely ham on the recovery for that and did loads of upper body work, I tore my left bicep distal tendon. Then 12 weeks later, I was back on the mats again and tore my right distal bicep tendon, literally a fortnight after full recovery. So I ended up with 3 surgeries within 15 months. But during the time that I was off the mats, I've got a gym in my garage, so I've got mats in there. I do solo drills. I've got a grappling dummy. Even when I've had I've just recently had my 3rd broken nose, actually, after what I was saying before about the MMA. So it's quite ironic, really, that I left MMA because of that. And then literally in September last year, got my nose broken a couple of months before doing the British no-gi. But like, I'm always on the mat. I'm doing something. And if it's not that, then I'm trying to turn the dial on what I'm doing learning. There's something that I'll be doing physically to improve my cardio, my strength, my mindset. It's always something. So in terms of that consistency, from the get-go, I've just been obsessed with it. And I train 7 days a week now. I only spar probably 3 or 4, but I am... So I only missed 4 sessions last year out of the entire year.
That is really something. I don't think I've spoken to anyone that has been that committed or that dedicated that they've
Or
shared.
mental.
Well, I mean, it becomes an obsession, doesn't it? The
It is all
the
day.
addiction, the love for jujitsu. Um, when I was thinking about the word consistency, whilst me and the kids train, we've had a little bit of time off for, like you say, injuries. We've always shown up consistently, week in, week out. And it's something that probably every listener listening or watching this is experienced very similar. You turn up every week because you want to and you love it so much.
Yes.
On a scale of 1 to 10, this is going to be no surprise. How much do you love Brazilian Jiu Jitsu?
11.
I love it.
It's absolutely in me. If you cut me open, which
Yeah,
quite a few surgeons actually have, unfortunately, but if you cut me open, it'd be like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu flags, and probably terms like os would come out of there, and pohakarayu and things like this would just come flowing out. I mean, I just love everything about it. It's so addictive because for me, like the thing I've always been obsessed with the physical side of things. Like I've done the bodybuilding stuff. Um, I like to sort of like turn the dial in terms of anything I can do off the mats to
yeah,
optimize. So I work like little flexibility drills on my ankles and stupid things like that. I brush my teeth standing on one foot with my eyes closed to help my balance, and it builds up a bit of proprioception. Completely
wow.
weird. I get it. And there is the odd one or two times where I've nearly hit my head on like the sink as I've been falling off for trying to stay up. But there's just a million and one things that you can do if you combine those with other things that you already do. So we talked a little bit before the podcast about habit stacking. I
Yeah,
am consistently looking for opportunities that I can just link two activities together. So if I'm already doing a thing like brushing my teeth, some
yeah,
people say that if you brush your teeth with the opposite hand, so I'm right-handed, you use your left hand, it helps to build up and develop neural pathways, which can help you in a lot of different ways around cognition. Well, I'm like, I can go one up from that. I'm going to do it on one leg with my eyes shut with my left hand. My teeth actually do get clean as well. Honestly, I promise you, they're still actually a little bit clean.
I love hearing about kind of living life more efficiently and being able to habit stack. I think that's such a great kind of keyword and takeaway. Certainly, there'll be lots more takeaways from this episode, but habit stacking is one of them. But just using something you're doing, having the efficiency and kind of doing something else at the same time. Some of us drive to jiu-jitsu and they will listen to podcasts like this podcast,
Yeah.
potentially. And, we can do all sorts of things, kind of layering up, building. And that's what jiu-jitsu is, isn't it? It's kind of layering up from those fundamentals, all of the different things. I'm not massively experienced in jiu-jitsu, but my brain is going, I'm just layering up and improving each time the angles, the kind of the strength or the not strength, and just all of those things. Yeah, tell me a bit about your strategy for learning jujitsu or improving your jujitsu on the mats.
So I'm quite a geek, as you might have sort of already gathered, because I like to dial in on everything. So with my sort of process, I have like a mind map.
Yeah,
And on that mind map, everything starts standing, right? And then you've got two ways you can go from that. You can either pull guard. No, 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 no. We don't pull guard. I'm joking. I actually quite like pulling guards. Please don't judge me on that. But I am sometimes a bit of a butt scooter. Or you can do a takedown.
yeah,
Or they can pull guard. I mean, either way, you kind of top or bottom. And then
yeah,
from there, you go, right, what are my sort of key things that I do? And I've essentially got my entire game plan drafted out, and I'm not sharing this with anybody before you ask. It's mine. But I will do that for clients as well if they want the same thing. If someone comes to me and says, right, because
yeah,
strategy is really important. You could have a lot of
yes,
different skills and a lot of techniques, but if you don't have a strategy with which to apply those, it's just a lot of random stuff, and you may or may not
yeah,
succeed. But having a strategy almost guarantees that you're going to get at least some form of success because you know where you're going to go with it all, and then you can identify where the gaps are. So in each of the areas, basically, so you've got
yeah,
turtle top, turtle bottom, side control top, side control bottom. and you go through all the different positions, and then I have about 4 different techniques from there, and 2 that are probably preferential. So I don't want too many. I might have
Yeah.
more than that, and I might have some funky stuff that it only happens if a person bases that way or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's a system that kind of builds off from that.
Yeah, so for me, the kind of the tech conversation and kind of having the efficiencies and improving, my mind, when you mentioned mind map, that's one of my favourite tools in the business that I kind of work in. And I could already imagine a really amazingly populated. I still don't know all the moves, all of the techniques, but I can now visualize takedowns at the top, pulling guard at the bottom, and then all of the kind of permutations off the bottom or off the top of all of those things. So if anyone's got any mind mapping software, I use a specific brand mind mapping software. Drop me a DM if you need any help, but go and find yourself a mind mapping piece of software and go and do that for yourself. It sounds like it's a game changer, especially if you're a blue belt.
It is on, and that's when I started it. I mean, I'm probably surmise that people are almost at like peak involvement at blue.
Yeah,
When you're a white belt, like everything's new, everything's fresh, but you might be unsurprised to hear that there's quite a large amount of white belts who kind of just quit before they even get to blue belt. I mean, it's just like, oh, sparring, that's really hard. I don't really know
yeah,
what to do. Or I've got my first staph infection and I'm like, Jesus, that was really horrible. I'm not going to do that again because I had to take antibiotics. And there's like this little cycle of people who just
yeah,
perhaps, without being too harsh about it, they're just not made for it. You know, they say
yeah,
that anybody can do jiu-jitsu. I would challenge that comment. And I say anyone
yeah,
could try it, but
yeah,
how many people stick out? And there's this statistic, and I mean, I don't know where people get these statistics from, but they reckon about 5 in every 1,000 people make it to black belt. So, like you were saying
yeah,
before, are you in awe of someone? That's 1 in 200.
yeah.
Maybe we should all be a little bit, actually, because that's a very small number of people that
Mm.
make it that far. But blue belt, I found quite a lot of attrition at blue belt because I think people went, "Oh, I've made it now. I've made it to this thing. It's really hard, and it might take people 2 years to get to." But if they don't, then the level of enthusiasm that people have is
Yeah.
through the roof, and that's where you really
Mm.
go, right? Well, actually, the coach has given me this belt now, and a different color from when I started. And you start to feel a bit more self confident. You start to understand more
Yeah.
about your own game, and then you go, right. Well, I'm going to dial this in a little bit now and start to look at what is my game. Can I get
Yeah.
like a private tuition off somebody to help me to
Mm.
build my own game plan?
Yeah.
Can I take that into competitions with me and use that as a strategy? And I think that's where like I started to document in a journal every session that I did when I was a blue belt as well. That was around that same time, sort of 2012,
Wow.
2013. Just after I did the Euros at white belt, I came back, got my blue belt, and I actually was going through my laptop before, just because I've got a new one and I got rid of my old one and gave it to my son, and I was making sure that there wasn't a lot of stuff on there that I didn't want him to potentially delete. And
Yeah.
I found like all of my old journal entries. I was like, I probably
Oh,
spent like
wow.
40 minutes just going through all this stuff, and I was like, Jesus Christ, like I really put a lot of effort into writing down everything.
Yeah, I think often I don't journal after each session. Sometimes there are things that I go, oh, that was, I surprise myself. And I'm sure, any of us listening would sometimes we're on the mat sparring and we surprise ourselves, which is a really nice feeling. But like you say, there are also elements that we go, okay, it would be really nice if we didn't do that thing again. That then, put us in bottom whatever situation, and then just remembering those things to be able to take them back to the next session. We've got so many influences on Instagram with all of the reels, all of the instructionals, so many different things. How do you sift through any of that, if at all, to kind of support your game? Obviously, maybe back in 2012, 2013, that resource wasn't available. But how valuable do you think it is to blue belts today?
Oh, it's massively valuable because it's free. There's so much of it. I really did focus a lot on YouTube. There's a lot of free content out there, but I bought a lot of instructionals as well. I've got Gary Tunnan's stuff, Gordon Ryan's stuff. Before that, it was Danaher. And if you look like BJJ Fanatics is full, like anybody's game. My game is largely based on Adam Wodzinski's actually. And his game was based on his coach before that around the sort of butterfly stuff. So there's tons there for free. There is an awful lot, I think, around technique. And that's one of the main things with jiu-jitsu, isn't it? What I do think is, and this is why I set up a community around this. There's not an awful lot really around mindset. There's not an awful lot around strength training that directly complements jiu-jitsu, and in particular training that can help us to not get injured, because that's a huge thing in jiu-jitsu, and lifestyle as well. So we've talked about habit stacking, but one of the things that I also sort of major on is other elements of lifestyle. So it's things like sleep optimization, it's optimization of movement in general, diet that can help us with that, the cardiovascular endurance side of things. And what I mean by that, a lot of people are like, yeah, but Rich, I actually already do sparring, right? That's cardio. No, there's a lot to be said, and we discussed about like Peter Attia before around like zone 2. He would probably refer to it as, but essentially what I'm talking about like is recovery cardiovascular training, the stress management, improved cognition, a million and one different supplements. Again, as someone who sort of loves to experiment and explore, I've tried all kinds of different things over the years. I've kind of settled on some stuff being good, like creatine and caffeine. They're kind of staples, protein powders. But there's a lot of other fringe things that are out there that I wouldn't necessarily recommend trying all this. And again, probably as it's a podcast, I would suggest if anyone does want to do it, they need to go and speak to a healthcare practitioner before they do any of these things.
Absolutely.
But there are, like, when I first started, it was like creatine, protein, maybe a couple of other things. And now there's stuff like on a monthly basis. I'm like, what the hell is this? And I have to go and like research it and figure out whether that's something that could be a game changer or but it generally isn't, because, I think some of these things are snake oil. But there's just so much more to it. That's the stuff that isn't as readily available, or it's not as obviously linked to jiu-jitsu. So whilst you're going out looking for your techniques, and you can find 35 ways of escaping side control, some of which, again, is probably bullshit, but it's there. It's some of that other stuff isn't as obvious, and we don't necessarily even know we need it. Like I didn't even realize that I needed some support around mindset. Like I've got a degree in psychology, that's my background. I coach people as well. But the stuff around mindset only really hit home after I'd gone through the significant injuries that I'd had. So torn ACL, torn both of my biceps. A lot of what got me back to where I needed to be was actually the mindset side of things. And then I'm like, well, if you can optimize that, you can actually go to a point where maybe you're not as nervous in competition anymore. And we all just accept that anxiety is part of competition. It is, but genuinely, and I'm not just saying this, it doesn't have to be.
This episode is sponsored by BJJ Blueprint. BJJ Blueprint is a growing community of jiu-jitsu practitioners who are actively building their strength, mindset, and lifestyle protocols. BJJ Blueprint boasts over 8,000 BJJ video techniques so that you are able to fast-track your game. If you want to build confidence with some basic mindset shifts and improve your BJJ lifestyle to make you as resilient and recovered as possible so that you can get the most out of your training, head over to www.school.com/couch-2-combat/about today and join the hundreds of BJJ hobbyists and athletes already in the community. That URL again, www.school.com/couch-2-combat/about. BJJ Blueprint, helping you get the best out of your training. This is the Jiu-Jitsu Lou podcast with me, Lou Temlett, coming to you from the UK. Go and check out the latest video clips over on jiu.jitsu.lu on Instagram. And as you're listening or watching on your favourite podcast platform, I'd really appreciate you dropping the show a rating and a review. Today, I'm having a conversation with Rich Thompson. Now, Rich, let's dig into mindset around jiu-jitsu and how that as a maybe off-mat technique and focus can really improve our game, whether it's for kind of general training or whether it's for competition. Tell me a bit more about mindset.
Well, some of this stuff, I think, when you speak to people who actually do jiu-jitsu, they probably won't actually accept it at face value because it seems a little bit nebulous. And what I mean by that is you can't just very easily pin it onto something. So if I said, I'm going to teach you a triangle, you need to kneel down and I'll wrap my right leg over your neck and my left leg under your armpit, get the right angle. That's really obvious. Where you say with mindset, it tends to then be actually, how do you even define that? So for me, a
Yeah.
lot of it's around behavior. So mindset is essentially just what you think, but
Yeah.
behavior is what you do as a result of what you think, and that's the
Yeah.
important bit. So one of the things that I really like, and this has come from meditation actually, is gratitude. And it's one of the things that I will do before, well, essentially before most life events, but particularly before
Yeah.
competition, is to get myself into a very sort of abundant mindset and say, for example, I'm just happy to be in one piece because I've not been in one
Yeah.
piece in the past. I'm happy to be the age I am and still be able to compete at a high level. I'm really happy that I'm in a country with a society that allows me to do that and supports that. I've got a family who allow
Yeah.
me to do that and support that. So by the time I kind of finish really sort of maybe 10 minutes of really solid mental conditioning around gratitude, I'm
Yeah.
already in a good frame of mind to just go off then and do the rest of the thing that I'm going to do. When it comes to
Yeah.
competition specifically, there's a lot of things that I sort of would talk people through if there was more time, but things like understanding self-worth, having belief that
Yeah.
you can achieve a certain thing. One of the things I often mention is I'll say like 3 minutes and 59 seconds and then just pause and they'll be like, why did you say that? I'm like, well, what do you think the significance of that might be?
Are
Three
you
minutes and 59
asking?
seconds.
Well,
I
I'm
am
going.
actually,
I've
yeah, I'm
got
going to see what you think.
okay. I've got 2 minutes left of a sparring session to go, and I can really up my game and get a submission.
Oh, I like it. It's very jiu-jitsu related. This one's related to Roger Bannister, who
Oh, okay.
actually, back in the 60s, broke the 4 minute mile. And before that,
Oh,
every single person on the earth thought that it was impossible, that your lungs would explode, your heart would pop, you would die. But then what
wow.
happened when he broke that record was everybody else started to do it under 4 minutes. And so simply
Yeah.
by that one person doing the thing,
Mm,
everybody else could all of a sudden do it. So it didn't, it showed that people could do it, but they just didn't
yeah.
believe in it, so it didn't happen. And so, like right at the very start, when I start speaking to
Yeah.
people about mindset, I have to get them to believe the things
Yeah.
themselves that they can then do. Because a lot of people start off and like, oh, that I could never do that, and you're like, well, how do you know?
Yeah.
Because you haven't gone through all the process and all the path to get there. And then you build up from that. You can eliminate things
Yeah.
like fear, anxiety, self-doubt,
Yeah.
and then you dial down into things like gratitude. But on the day of competitions, I have like a very
Yeah.
specific process that I'll do. And I'll talk about it really, really briefly. One is the sort of the gratitude to get me into the right sort of mindset. The next bit is around some sort of visualization. So I'll start visualizing things that I've done in the past and I've had good performance with because I've competed in the past and done well. I'll think about that. But if you haven't, you can maybe just
Yeah.
think about a sparring session and then you start to transpose that into a future iteration. So your next competition that you might have later on that day, you start thinking about how that's going to be, but think about
Yeah.
it in the past tense because you've already done it. That's your mind then already being in that frame of mind where you've been there, you've done that, and you've conquered whatever it is you're going to conquer.
Yeah.
Then some sort of confidence conditioning around some affirmations. So I use quite a few, maybe about 5 different affirmations that I'll say a load of times. And then I have a bit of an identity statement. And that's something that's very unique to the different person. So what is it about you? If I was to say, what is this? What is it about you personally that you think sets you apart from your opponents? And from speaking to you, you've got a very logical, very process-driven mindset. So it could just be that you're like a genius, and that could be a thing that you've got that
Yeah.
you're super technical, and then I do throw a bit of a swear word into it as well because that almost helps the mind to just go like I'm awake to this now.
Yeah.
So do you want me to tell you what mine actually is?
Yeah. Go on. Go on.
Am I
Go for
allowed to
it.
swear? Am I allowed to say a
Okay.
naughty word?
We'll. You can. We'll prepare for this one.
So mine is mine is that I'm a natural athlete and I'm fucking unstoppable on the mats, and that's it.
Wow.
That's all I say. And it may or may not even be necessarily 100% true because I have been
Yep.
stopped on the mats a few times. But
Yeah.
that's my identity statement. And then I kind of
Nice.
snap myself back out of it. And then that's me. And I'm like ready to go. And then when I've
Yep.
been there, sort of wandering about, speaking to people at the tournament, I'm always super high energy, really
Yeah.
happy, really enthusiastic. And when it comes to the actual competition itself, slap and bump, I am just happy to be there. I'm happy that I
Yeah.
am where I am. And
Yeah.
I'm not focused on the outcome. So for me, the outcome is irrelevant in terms of that journey. Yes, I'd love to get a
Yeah.
gold medal. And
Yeah.
this last year, like 2024, was insane because, like, after 4 years off the competition scene, 3 major surgeries, my 5 competitions last year, I won every one of them. I won the Brits in the
Wow.
gi, a black belt. I won the Brits in no gi, a black belt, and didn't have a single point scored on me. Each time I'd gone in there, I had that same
Yeah.
sort of focus that I wasn't going to look at the outcome. I was only going to look at my performance, how
Yep.
hard I try, what my mindset was doing in terms of
Mm.
self-talk. So what sort of things am I saying? What does my body language look like? And I can control
Yep.
all of that. And some of that's internal. It gives me confidence, but it also
Yep.
potentially makes the person on the other side of the mat feel a little bit less confident because of how I am
Yep.
and how I carry myself.
Yep.
And so all of these things, all sort of whisked up and added together, have just created this kind of framework in my own head where I'm like, yeah, like whatever happens, I'm going to be good with. And then
Yep.
bizarrely, because I've taken myself away from I need to win, I need to get this match, I need to like win a point or
Mm.
whatever it is I need to do. I just need to push as hard as I can. I need to just do me. I forget about whether they've trained harder than me, trained longer than me, they're bigger and better and stronger, whatever. The last guy I fought was in the final of the Brits. Real decent guy called Mark Bottom. Monkeys, his nickname is. He's trained for 22 years. He's trained for like 7 years more
Wow.
than I have. So he's super experienced. And I know that. And I know
Mm.
he's really dangerous on the legs. And my coach had
Yep.
messaged me saying, "Oh, you might have Monkey. Just be really mindful. You know, if he gets near your feet, you've got to be really careful." And none of that really entered my head because it's not about him.
Yep.
It's about what I bring to the mats. So that's it. I mean, there's an awful lot more to it than that. But in a summary, that's kind of like the technique that I do with people who work with me, that I do myself. Find it
Yep.
works really, really well.
Amazing. Rich, I have kept up, and hopefully anyone listening or watching has kept up with this narrative. If you haven't, go back and listen again because it's all really important stuff. But I just want to go back to the teaching the technique of the triangle. What came into my mind was my legs aren't long enough. They're not skinny enough to pull on the triangle because everyone with really skinny legs that are really tall are amazing at triangles. So I've already kind of brought it on board, that imposter syndrome with that particular move. How would you kind of, in a very short description, help someone like me that's got into imposter syndrome mode with pulling on a triangle?
100% do not sweat it. No one's judging
Okay.
you. Be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Everybody is different. Like I know a guy who competes who's got no legs, right? So he can't do a triangle. And, no,
Yeah.
and I know it sounds bizarre to say I'm going to compare you with two legs and him with no legs,
Yeah.
but if you can't do a triangle because of what you've just said, it's
Yeah.
not any different. And no one's going to judge Mark because he's got no legs that he can't do a triangle.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he doesn't lose sleep over it. Like he just does what he can with what he's got.
Yeah.
And I've always said that. Like I've come across people on the mats before, and I actually found out from a friend that I actually really upset somebody by saying the same thing to them. And I hope that doesn't do the same for you because it's meant with
No.
the absolute love and
No.
respect in terms of
Yeah.
people's individual characteristics. But I have quite long legs, so like triangles are fucking brilliant for me. I train with some people who've got like legs that are like bigger than my body, and they just can't do it. And
Yeah.
likewise, on the flip side of it,
Mm.
those guys I try and throw my legs around to triangle, they also have like massive shoulders and massive necks, right? And they're
Yeah.
quite happy with me trying them because they're just going to put their shoulder forward, lean forward. And the next thing I know, I'm lying on bottom on side control with my leg like
Yeah.
over my face thinking, why did I try and do that? So it works both ways.
Yeah.
They might not be able to triangle me, but
Actually, I'm wondering,
it's that.
having said that, if you're good at a move, or if you're not good at pulling on a triangle, are you better in a defense mode against triangles? So if you have a weakness in an area, is your defense stronger because of that?
I don't necessarily know if it stacks up in every single
Hmm.
situation, but there's probably some form of correlation there. Like, for example, one of my training partners is 170 kilos. He isn't
Mm.
triangling anybody, but
Yeah.
I know for a fact I can't triangle him. I can't even stay on mount on him. My knees don't
Yeah.
touch the floor. So I can
Yeah.
go like knee on belly, a bit of a side control. If I get his back,
Yeah.
he will stuff my leg between his legs, pinch
Yeah.
his legs together, lean forward. His
Yeah.
stomach goes into the bottom of my ankle, stroke my knee, and
Yeah.
it toe holds me. I'm just on the guy's back and I'm being toe holded by him. No one else can do that I train with, but he can because he weighs 170 kilos and the size and shape
Yeah.
that he brings to the
Yeah.
mats. But then there's weird things that he can do that no one else can, but there's
Yeah.
also things that he can't do. And
Yeah.
I suppose it's probably a bit similar to injuries. Whenever I speak to people, and like I've mentioned it a few times, I've been through some pretty shitty injuries.
Yeah.
I'll always say to people, focus on the things that you can do and not the things you can't do. So my last
Yeah.
one was broken nose in September. I'm like, oh, I'm 2 months out for a comp. This isn't particularly good timing because I know what happens. They have to reset it, and when it's reset, I have 6 weeks where they need to leave it, and I can't spar.
Yeah.
Between you and me, I did spar a little bit, but within the confines of safety. So I go, right. What can I do? Well, I can run. I can go on a
Yeah.
bike. I
Yeah.
can lift weights. I can drill. I can do cardio conditioning, mindset stuff.
Yeah.
I meditate daily, so I'm going to carry on doing that. I can still sort of use all the recovery techniques that I use. I've got a sauna. I've got an ice bath. I've got like resistance bands. You name it. I've pretty much got it because that's my other thing. I seem to collect insane like amounts of recovery stuff. None of which obviously makes any difference to my broken nose, unfortunately. But like I used that time, I think, really efficiently. And then when I got back to a point where I could spar, I was
Yeah.
like, no different. Like I was probably even physically fitter in some respects because one of the things that some people on this call will get, but some people won't
Yeah.
have figured out yet. So I'll give them a little bit of insight into how things go in the future.
Mm.
I get a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, I just get my fitness from sparring," right? Which is fine, and you can, but think about it like this: if you're actually quite significantly better than people that you train with, or
Mm.
you've reached that level. And again, this isn't a brag, but there's a ton of people because I'm a black belt that are at like a lower level than me in terms of skill set, and I'm quite physically fit, so I can actually play a game that means I'm not burning all my energy, I'm not using all my
Yeah.
strength, and so I can finish a session, and I haven't absolutely nailed myself to the wall in terms of where I might want to be to dial
Yeah.
my heart rate up and get my conditioning out.
Mm.
And so I'd probably challenge that and say certainly higher level people need to be looking at something off the mats
Yeah.
because they'll probably find that they're managing their cardio really well, they're managing their energy
Mm.
reserves really well, they're using their positions, their pressures, their grips, and everything to such a level that they're not
Yeah.
actually getting as big a workout as a fresh, physically active white belt who comes in and they're like,
Yeah.
rah, and like
Yeah.
in 2 minutes they're lying on the floor like dying. And some of these people
Yeah.
are like CrossFit experts. They do high roxes. They can bench press 140 kilos, squat 250 kilos. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know why I'm so gassed out and I've lost all my strength. It's because they're not doing it properly.
Yeah. Amazing. I love hearing the kind of development and the tenacity just to keep going during that time where you can't spar, 6 weeks or maybe not 6 weeks. But I just want to reflect on how we all felt as white belts, feeling gassed out. And actually, there was some pride in feeling like that because you really did feel like you had a great workout. Um, you know, not something to repeat week in week out for a long period of time, because it's healthier to choose other ways to improve your strength and conditioning and not be so gassed out. But that there's a lot to it, and I guess as for me now as a blue belt, I don't feel so gassed out. So from what you're saying, it sounds like I need to go and find something to kind of increase my energy or whatever, the strength and conditioning or something, so that I'm maximizing my performance by you know training at a higher zone.
Essentially. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are ways. So I would say there's like a slight caveat to this. And people
Yeah.
like Marcelo Garcia, I don't know if you know
Yeah.
Marcelo. Yeah, cool. So Marcelo was like one of the greats, and he
Yeah.
was really well known for like smashing guys twice his size. Marcelo was also well known for not doing strength and conditioning stuff. And I think it's kind of old school that because people
Mm.
are all doing it now. But
Yeah.
one of his ethoses was that he would, when he wanted to work his cardio, i.e., speed, pace, and
Yeah.
longevity, he'd get smaller people who were really fast. And he'd just like essentially just be like cats on a hot tin roof, just running around each other. And that would
Yeah.
be his cardio, right? And then he'd go, I want to work strength now. And he'd just get all the biggest units and pretty much
Oh.
try and use strength on these
Yeah.
absolute giants. And you are still, so jiu-jitsu is funny in that you are going to build isometric strengths because you physically pinned in a position. You're going to
Yeah.
build plyometric strength, which is your explosive strength, because you have to move from one to the next quite quickly.
Mm.
You're probably going to get some form of hypertrophy, which is the growth of the actual muscle in volume
Yeah.
itself. And so all these things will probably happen, and even your sort of tendons, which is one of the main things that I like to focus on now for a very specific reason, but your tendons will develop a little bit of extra thickness and stiffness as well, which is really important in how they transfer strength from your muscle to your bone and allow you to move in a certain way. And so Marcelo used to do that. I think now, if you look back, Marcelo's kind of old school. It worked for him at the time. But now everybody, like if you look at the best people in the world, you're probably going to be talking about people like Gordon Ryan, who,
Yeah.
let's be honest, is jacked, isn't he? Nicky Rodriguez, absolutely jacked as well. Craig Jones is a pretty stacked guy. He's a pretty decent, pretty swole guy. There's not that many of them, particularly when you look at the bigger weight categories. And then you even start to go down to the lower weight categories. Mikey Musumeci, if you look at him with his top off, he absolutely shredded. This is because they've dialed down on the diets, they've dialed down on the training with weights, resistance training. They're also probably doing some form of conditioning off the mats as well. And I'd be surprised if nowadays they're not doing the long steady state zone 2 stuff. So I used to train before I had all my injuries. The reason I had them was because I trained too much. I do 7 days a week of sparring. I'd literally spar every day, hard. So Monday through Sunday, I've got a gym in my garage, so I train in that when the gym was shut. I also did 3 sets of weights and probably a couple of conditioning. So it was about 12 sessions a week overall, couple of times a day for most of those days. And that's like late 30s age wise. So I guess most people would be like, yeah, you're probably going to tear something, which obviously I did. and then I still didn't learn the lesson, and I tore some other shit, and then it happened again. So then I'm like, right, okay, I'm going to train 5 days a week now. The 2 strength sessions and the 3 jiu-jitsu grappling sessions. And I found a guy called Joel Jameson. I don't know if have you heard of Joel?
No, tell me more.
Joel Jameson is a strength and conditioning coach who majors on the sort of zone 2 stuff, really. He's trained Mighty Mouse from the UFC and a bunch of other fairly notable UFC fighters. And he is big on cardio, steady state cardio. And I used to absolutely hate the idea of it. I hated the principle of it. I couldn't see how it was anything that was even remotely relevant to jiu-jitsu, because it's 5 minutes, it's full scale. You're using explosive strength and power. You like the difference between lactic and alactic energy sources. For me, you're not in that more endurance side of the longer term cardiovascular stuff. But then I started researching it myself. I started listening to more of his seminars. He does like webinars that I jumped in on a few times. The long and short of it is I ended up buying his proprietary HRV monitoring heart rate monitor called Morpheus, trained with Morpheus, with a back-end app that kind of links into your training zones. And that changed my physical characteristics. I think I started that in November 2023, but then I've seen through using it consistently, and it's boring as hell, but like twice a week. So my 2 rest days then became 2 days of cardio, and that's what I do on a Wednesday and Sunday. I just do cardio between 35 and 45 minutes, roll gecko bike, treadmill between the 2. And I keep my heart rate, depending on what the actual monitor's saying my zones are, because it does your HRV in the morning and works out what zones you should be in. HRV is heart rate variability for people who don't know, and that's the time difference between your actual beats, which is a good indicator of longevity and health and fitness. But I am now convinced that I am fitter. I can get my energy back between rounds quicker and easier. In a round where I might have, like, after 20 seconds of just sheer activity, I might be able to go for 25 seconds. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're going absolutely like hell for leather, those 5 seconds could be the difference in winning a scramble, or like this scramble has just gone on for too long and I need to stop, and the person's just going to come up on top.
Those sound amazing techniques. I'm going to be listening back to this episode quite a lot, Rich. Now, I've recently spoken with Vanessa English, and she's recovering from an ACL. Now, does it correlate that being a black belt, you are likely to have ACL or other injuries?
I just think jiu-jitsu can do that. So I've got a really good mate of mine, Richard Hill he's called. He's currently recovering from, see if I can get this right, tearing his LCL, ACL, and PCL. in one fell swoop. He's a big guy. He's really muscular, big CrossFit dude, blue
Yeah.
belt, and this guy jumped guard on him, and I'm like, you guys are too big to be jumping guard. Jumps guard, his knee just basically imploded. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, that's at blue belt. He's just had surgery. I think he's recovering pretty well. But I like in the time I've trained, I've seen an absolute ton. Knees just
Yeah.
get bent in funny ways in jiu-jitsu. People fall
Yeah.
over backwards whilst they're kneeling down. That can put some pressure on the knees. Mine was from being caught in a lockdown in a competition. And as the guy was extending his legs outwards, I had this brilliant idea of extending my leg even further to escape it, which actually worked. But then I tore my MCL to get out, and I was like, "Yay, I'm
Wow.
free!" But I felt this massive snap. I still won that match actually because like I didn't feel any pain whatsoever, and I was
Yeah.
out of the position. So I was like, "Hey, like let's go." But then the next day I paid for it. I woke up and it was like an
Yes.
elephant's knee, and I was like, "This doesn't
Oh
look
no.
too good." And
Okay.
yeah, then the surgery came. So correlations, black belts, I'd say potentially, but I think it's just jujitsu. I think.
Is there a way to stay safe and more injury free?
Wow, there is.
Apart
And
from apart from stopping training jiu-jitsu, because obviously we all still want to train jiu-jitsu, but we don't necessarily want to be quite as injured as some of the accounts that we hear about. Yeah.
some of it is from overtraining. Like with me in particular, it was from overtraining.
Yeah.
And then some of it I think is instability of joints at certain levels. And so one of the things that I absolutely major on is, and I've mentioned it before, is tendon
Mm.
training. And what that sort of means is ultra high reps,
Yeah.
and being really deep into the end range of the movement. So, for example, I'll do lunges where my knees come right forward over my toes, and I'll
Yeah.
do a ton of those. There's a guy called Ben Patrick you might have heard of called Knees Over Toes guy. He's quite big online. He's really good for the sort of the knee stuff. If that's all you did, you're probably not going to get significantly muscular because you're doing really high reps. It's not really
Yeah.
about that. But tendons do grow thicker. And one of the things I always think about when I look at this is your tendons are really important in terms of how much your muscle can lift. And so, for example, if you look at the
Yeah.
size of your average bicep,
Mm.
and then you look at the tendon that links it to the radial bone there,
Yep.
it's fairly small. And what
Yeah.
you can lift with your bicep isn't a huge amount. But then if you look at the size of your calf, it's not a huge amount bigger. But what connects your calf to your leg is your Achilles tendon, which is massive. And
Okay.
so you've got a very similar sort of
Mm.
size and shape muscle that moves a
Yeah.
shed load more weight because the
Yeah.
tendon's a lot thicker and stronger. So it allows that muscle to be able to do that. And so then
Mm.
wouldn't it be good if we could have tendons that were thicker, didn't put a load of extra weight onto us, but allowed us to be
Yeah.
a lot stronger. And
Ah.
so that building the thickness and strength of tendons at the
Yeah.
very sort of end range of movement um, will just make you more robust. So I do think mobility
Okay.
is good. And this is kind
Okay.
of like mobility, but it's mobility with weight as well. And so I'm kind of getting
Okay.
two for the price of one. And so
Amazing.
that for me is kind of like the magic bullet, really. And I've been doing this probably. I've been so interested because I've torn tendons. Right, if you can develop tendon strength and tendon thickness without putting a stack of muscle on, you're actually going to
Yeah.
be stronger for your weight category as a jiu-jitsu competitor. Unless you're an ultra heavyweight,
Yeah.
that's got to be like golden, right?
Amazing. Right. Rich, how can people get in touch with you if they've got injuries or they need support? And equally, how can they follow your journey?
Right, so I've got my Instagram is at Rich Thompson and then two underscores. So that's my main account. By all means, drop me a follow, drop me a DM. If you've got any questions, you can jump in on there. I also have Couch to Combat, and the idea was really around beginners starting off their journey. So there's four modules which are all free. Yeah, anybody can jump into there, and the link to that is in my bio on Instagram. Or again, people can get in touch with me and message me, and I'll send them it through. And the modules really are a flavour of the things I've talked about. So there's one about mindset, one's around strength training, and it doesn't really touch on the tendon training. That's on there's a sister site to it, which is a paid one. I've got another bit which is about lifestyle, so that's your sleep optimization, your movement, your diet, and just really simple sort of actionable stuff that people can take away. And then the kind of main thing is a full 13 module course called Before BJJ. And actually all of that is a full
Ooh.
roadmap from like start to finish of the history of BJJ, what it actually is, how you can find your first academy that you might want to train in,
Oh,
what you need to
wow.
buy before you go, things around hygiene, what to expect on day one when you get there, how to sort of even engage with people on the mats. Because I've found this over the years, and I've never really probed too much into it, because you just like, yeah, whatever. People walk
Yeah.
in, and like for me, it's that long ago I can't even remember what I did. But they don't,
Yeah.
when you're like, let's spar for the first time, they don't even know about like a slap and bump. So like
Yeah.
this course talks about how to do a slap and bump. Then it talks about objectives behind sparring, because some people are like, I just need to try and kill this person, and I don't even know what I'm doing. Well, it's not that. It's about improvement, isn't it? And so,
Yeah.
like, I've got the journals in there that I talked about before with the reps. There's a free, you can download
Amazing.
that, so you can journal after you've trained, and then do it with a purpose right from the very outset. So that's the sort of the free side. There's a community in there as well where people can all jump in, ask questions of me. I'm on there pretty much every day, and I'll answer questions, or I'll drop in bits of extra knowledge as well. And I also do like the odd live training sessions. I think there's about 165 people in that community right now.
Fantastic.
And hopefully getting the sort of the value of the free content. And then on the paid side, there's a small number of people, because then it's that commitment to go from, all right, I'm getting all this free stuff, and this is it, and I love it. And it's that mindset of saying, well, how much, for me, this is about how much you believe in yourself to take it to that next level, where you really dial down and optimize on everything. So the full periodization around your training, and not just going, oh, I'm just going to go into the gym and just lift a few things up and hope that I'm going to get better. This is about really planning and preparing how to do that to the best of your abilities, but with also things like habit stacking, goal setting, optimizing the time that you have so that you can get the most out of it. Some of the things that we've already talked about in there, and then really dialing down everything that sits around the outside of jiu-jitsu, so that when you go back into the gym, you are like peak condition to just do that.
Rich, this has been an overwhelmingly information full episode, and I absolutely love everything that you have to say.
Thank you
But
so
for me,
much.
I'm taking away the full kind of gratitude piece, because I think that's primarily one of the things that is accessible to anyone, anywhere. And I will add all of your links in the show notes. So if you've missed anything, go and read through the show notes, and everything will be there. Rich, thanks again for being here. I really appreciate your wealth of knowledge and
Thanks for the
experience,
invite.
and just everything. I'm wishing you super success and continued finding out all the new technologies and things that can, make us all better at jiu-jitsu.
Thank you so much. Loved it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for telling your friends about this show. And as soon as this episode ends, I'd really appreciate you dropping the show a rating and a review. Thanks again for listening. Catch you on the next episode of the Jiu Jitsu podcast.